As Catherine said, this workshop is being hosted by the Clean Conferencing Institute and our group, which is affiliated with the UCSF Academic Senate Committee on Sustainability. And we wanted to give you a little bit of background before we hand it over to Josh and Sue about what we've been doing over the past 5 years. So Catherine and I have been working together for 5 years. Amazing to say that. We started during the pandemic with some outstanding medical students with whom we conducted focus groups to understand the culture of academic travel at a time when we had all been forced to stop traveling. And that led to a paper, and in a couple of minutes, I'll share some of what we learned in the focus groups. We've developed our team over the years, intervening years, and over the past couple of years in particular, we have presented at the NIH Future of Scientific Conferencing meeting, which is where we met Josh and Sue. We've actually conducted a survey with all chairs, chiefs, and directors at UCSF on academic travel. And actually, we presented some of our findings and recommendations to the Committee on Advancement and Promotion, and I'll talk briefly about that. So just to get started, just to tell you a little bit about the focus groups that we conducted back in 2020. This was with faculty across all 4 schools and career stages. And we're interested in understanding what travel meant, its role in our careers, our advancement. And just to go through our findings really quickly, we, of course, found, which is not going to be surprising to all of you, that academic travel promotes collaboration. At the same time, it can disrupt home life and academic duties. Faculty feel an implicit pressure to travel for career advancement and success. They want more guidance on when is travel necessary, how much should I be traveling to conferences. And there was consensus that expanding abilities to attend conferences virtually will democratize these meetings, particularly for colleagues who are early career, don't have resources to travel a lot, and especially colleagues in lower income countries. So, and also not listed here, something we learned is that faculty said they'd really like to have the means of determining their own carbon footprint. A lot of us are concerned about our impact on the climate, but we actually don't know what our various activities are contributing. So fast forward ahead to last year when we did our survey with chairs, chiefs, and directors, we had a really good response rate. It was 42%. We learned, and this is just a snapshot of what we learned. It was a bit more extensive, but we learned that 39% say that presenting at conferences is required for promotion. 51%, on the other hand, said presenting at conferences is nice to have, but not required. 14%, only 14% said in-person presentations are more important than virtual. And 95% said that their faculty limit travel because of cost and/or family obligations. And then finally, almost all said they do not discuss the environmental impacts of travel with faculty. We presented these findings at a meeting with CAP in January, and in a moment I'll tell you what came out of that meeting. So the recommendations that came out of all of this work are fourfold. So first of all, we think UCSF should enable faculty and other employees to understand their carbon footprint. We think our institution can advance solutions to excessive travel that could be a model for other academic organizations. We think there should be clear guidance from leadership about how necessary travel is for career advancement. This actually led to CAP endorsing several statements after we met with them on the connection between travel and advancement. All of these are going to be included in the faculty handbook. And they include that faculty are not required to list whether a presentation was made in person or virtually, and that virtual presentations are weighed equally for purposes of advancement. So we're really pleased about that. And then finally, we would like our institution to develop and support virtual formats for meetings and conferences, which is why we're here today, featuring Josh and Sue. So I'm going to stop sharing and pass the baton over to Josh and Sue.
All righty. Thank you so much. It's just a real pleasure to be here, and thank you all for inviting us. So, I'm Sue Allen, and this is Josh Gutwell, if you want to wave, Josh. Um,
Hello, hello.
and we are at the Clean Conferencing Institute, and so this is a demonstration workshop, as Catherine said, on virtual conferences, particularly focusing on human connections and how to support them. So just to give you a very quick overview of what we're going to do with the rest of the time, which will take us until 11:30. We're going to talk for about 15 minutes, maybe something like that. And in that time, we're going to give you a quick sense of why we're doing this work, why we believe it's important, and then a little bit of the theory that we use to work and some examples. But the main part of it is going to be you experiencing some of the ideas that we've been talking about. So please bear with us. We are going to provide tech support as needed, and but we hope you won't disappear because I think you'll really enjoy it. And some of these things really have to be experienced to get a sense of how powerful they are. So, Josh, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, yeah. So, hi, folks. I'm Josh Gutwill. It's such a pleasure to be with you here today. So we just want to start with, why are we even trying to improve virtual conferencing? Like, why do we think virtual conferencing is a good idea? And it turns out that virtual conferencing is great for the triple bottom line for people, planet, and profit. It's good for people because without all that travel, without the flying and the hotels and all of that, it's much less expensive for people to go and it's easier for people to attend, particularly people with mobility challenges or kids at home, that kind of thing. It's good for the planet because without all the flying and the driving, there's a lot less carbon emitted. And it's can be good for profit as well. The production costs are so much lower for virtual conferences that associations can oftentimes lower their registration fee and still earn the same or even more profit. So what we advocate for is not getting rid of in-person conferences altogether, but just having each association alternate each year between virtual one year and in-person the next, and thereby cutting their emissions in half and broadening the participation in their conferences. And we know of several associations who are already doing this alternating model. But in order for this to work, we really have to improve virtual conferencing. I mean, for all of us experienced virtual conferences in the pandemic that were, shall I say, suboptimal or extremely ungratifying. And so we're really trying to improve what virtual conferencing can be. And so Sue is going to talk a little bit about some of our ideas for how to do that. Back over to you, Sue.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so we've spent some time thinking about what conferences look like in terms of their sessions, and we've made a rough cut between what we call static sessions and dynamic sessions. And the idea there is that there are things that, like lectures and group discussions and workshops, where you mostly sit in a chair and listen to a speaker. Those are very important and much valued, but they tend to be different from the dynamic sessions, which are the sort of the fluid, informal things where you chat to someone sort of serendipitously or connect with friends in exhibit halls, evening events, coffee breaks, and that sort of thing. And if you start looking at the characteristics of those two different categories, you do find that there are differences in the kinds of interactions that they support and also in the kinds of conversations that happen. So this is really just to say that during the pandemic, a lot of focus was on the static, and we still know how to do that pretty well in a lot of different ways. But the dynamic are really the place that the whole system kind of falls apart. Um, and and those sort of informal, dynamic walk around, make choices about who you want to talk to and so on are radically underdeveloped in the formal world or even missing. Despite their being really important, the research literature shows that people really value these, and they're particularly important for inclusion and a sense of belonging for newcomers to our field. So our theory of action is really to try to focus on those informal conversations in the dynamic sessions. How can we make them feel really great? And our theory is that if we do that, virtual as a format will be inherently more attractive across the board. And that will lead to greater equity. These are the things Josh talked about, lower costs and lower carbon emissions. So, Josh, theory.
Yeah, so our approach to improving dynamic virtual conferencing is a three-legged stool approach. We think there are three things that you really have to pay attention to and design for. And that is the platforms that you choose to use, the activities that you create, and the social norms that you articulate. And we'll kind of give some examples in each one of these, and then we'll give you the opportunity to really experience all three in a kind of new way. So let's talk about platforms first. There are tons of good platforms already out there for different kinds of session formats. And there are new and exciting platforms coming online every year. So we're just going to show you two examples. And then later in the workshop, you'll actually get to experience the spatial activities that you're seeing here in software called Spatial Chat. And I just want to say, we're not affiliated with any of these platforms. We're not trying to sell you on any of them. We're just using them to demonstrate what can be done in the virtual space. So let's start with these roundtables in the bottom corner here. AirMeet is a commercial platform. It's a virtual conferencing platform. Many of you have probably used AirMeet, and they have a wonderful, in our view, wonderful roundtables feature. And this is what it looks like when you come in. So you want people to talk in small groups. You set up these roundtables, people come in, and they can see different tables that they can sit at. And the idea is that you click on one of these seats, or you click on join, and you go into a roundtable room, and it looks a lot like a Zoom room. So, you can see the other people, you have all your controls that you're used to. But what's especially impressive about the way this is designed is you can still see all the other tables. So we think that provides a sense of fluidity and flexibility where people can just feel like, oh, maybe I'll jump over to that conversation instead of sticking with this one. So just to show you some other cool features, going back to this overview, before you even decide to sit down at a table, if you just hover over someone's image or their initials, you'll see their full name, their title, their affiliation, and if you want to click further, you can see their full profile. And so this is almost better in the virtual space than in the in-person space where you'd be sitting at a round table and have kind of no idea who's at the table. Here you really get a sense before you sit down of who's at that table. The other thing that the tables have, as you can see, are these labels. And these can be questions for people to talk about. They could be discussion topics, or they could be set up like here where it tells you kind of who's the speaker at this table, who's facilitating this. So we think that these features all taken together offer participants real agency in deciding who do I want to talk with and what do I want to talk about before entering a table, which is much stronger than, say, like a Zoom breakout setup. Okay, so that's small group conversations, an example of that. Back over to you, Sue, to talk about a totally different kind of platform.
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, so this one I want to talk to you about is called Who to Chat. It's actually not a commercial product. It was designed by Dr. Sawyer Park at MIT. She's now at Emory. So it doesn't have fancy production values, but it's got some really nice features we just wanted to share, again, as examples of what you can be doing in this new world. And Josh talked to us about the importance of having meaningful conversations in these small groups. But just to name, there's a big challenge always around finding the people that you really want to be talking with. And so Sawyer Park really took this on and focused on three steps, kind of broke down the process of finding the people you want to talk to into three steps. One is really effectively profiling all the people at the conference, so you really know who they are. Second is matching, and algorithms to match this is actually a whole research area, as you probably know, is recommender engines. And then thirdly, introducing, because it turns out that shyness is a major factor for people at conferences, both in person and virtual. The feeling that you don't want to break into someone, you don't feel you don't feel worthy of bothering a very senior person, especially junior faculty have this problem, and so on. So she really took on these different steps and tried to support them so that the overall networking experience would be easier. So I'll just give you a few quick slides of what that looks like. As you log on to Who to Chat, you put in your basic profiling information, very standard. But then it goes beyond this to profile, like here I'm using my example of me, to profile me in two major ways. And the first of these is that it offers me a menu with all the sessions, and I get to choose which of the sessions I find most interesting. And I can choose one, or I can choose two or three, or I can choose a bunch. And what it's really doing as I click off on these choices is it's noting what my current interests are. What am I choosing to attend at this particular conference? So her brilliance was to say this is a measure of interest, which is a really important trait for meeting other people. So here in the next slide, you can see that paragraph in the middle. That's a summary that AI created of what I just clicked in my interests. It tells you what I'm interested in at this conference. Great for starting conversations, by the way. Then another form of profiling of me is my recent publications. So it's got a list and it scrapes these automatically without my doing anything. It finds them online. And so now each person at this conference is now profiled in these two ways by my current interests and by my prior publications. And then these buttons you can press, and I won't take you through them. We don't have time to go through them all, but I will just say these are really nice multi-dimensional characterizations of a profile. I get to pick now, do I want to meet experts in my area? Do I want to meet people who have a different subfield but the same field? Do I want to meet people who are different from me or who share my interests? So it allows me to, and each time I will receive a list, an automatically generated list in priority order of people that I should look out for because I could probably have great conversations with them. And then one thing also just to point out about this issue of shyness and introducing, I also have the option to suggest that two people meet each other, and that will show up for each of them saying, you should meet this. Sue thinks you should meet this person, and here's what you should talk about. Talk about virtual conferencing because you have that in common. So it's another way, easy, simple, to reduce the barriers to finding the people that you really want to be talking with.
Okay. Yeah, so those are just a couple of examples of some platforms that are out there that kind of take it to the next level. As I said, we're going to be trying a spatial platform in a few minutes, but let's just talk about activities for a second. Activities are so important. Like designing the activities carefully is critical. But because we're going to be experiencing a whole bunch of activities in spatial chat soon, we just want to very quickly like mention a couple of different kinds of activities that you can do virtually, we think rather well. You know, posters and having people reflect or talk in small groups or doing think pair shares, even entertainment events. Um, the main point, though, is to design activities that are engaging, that are professionally and personally meaningful to people, and that really promote a sense of belonging for folks, like people feeling that this association is a place for me. So rather than show you right now, we're going to talk about the third leg of the stool, social norms. And then once we're experiencing spatial chat, we'll get to see what some of those activities really feel like. Sue, you want to talk about social norms?
Sure. So just briefly, the third leg of our stool is social norms, and these are the kinds of things that are easier in person. We know how to move around a floor and talk to people. We know how to be at an entertainment event or a coffee break. But in the virtual space, that's much more challenging. So, and very rarely talked about is that people may not know how to behave in socially sanctioned ways. So, an example or a few examples when I'm using the platform, how do I ask a question? Because there are multiple ways to do that. How do I interact with others? How do I join a conversation? How do I leave a conversation in respectful ways? And then a whole bunch of questions about facilitation. Will there be a facilitator in my small group? How do we take turns? How do we divide the time? All of these things are set by social norms that are generally implicit or just missing. And people get anxious and often just leave virtual meetings simply because they don't want to tackle these challenging questions. So research has shown that if you can be explicit about these, that people feel more comfortable and are more likely to stay. So some examples are: how do I ask a question? Use the chat. How do I interact with others? Hover nearby and someone will invite you in. And for spontaneous facilitation, maybe you're doing small groups where you need a volunteer facilitator. So then saying that and that there are helpful resources in the chat. So just to say these are examples, but when you think about all the kinds of situations that happen at online conferences in these dynamic spaces, there are lots and lots of different places where people may get stuck because they don't have explicit social norms.
Awesome. So before we move into spatial chat, do we have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing here, so we can see everybody. Do we have any questions about the presentation so far? And maybe what you could do is just raise your hand using the React. If you go into reactions, there's a raise your hand feature. You can click on that. Any questions at all from anyone? I bet somebody has a question.
Sure.
Everyone
I have a
decided to.
question.
Yeah, Chanel.
Oh, okay.
We'll go to Cindy.
Um, what are your thoughts on uh, the need for tech literacy in advance of an event? Is it enough for a participant to show up and sort of figure it out the day of as part of some short orientation? Or is there a video recording perhaps they're instructed to watch before they arrive? Or is there maybe like a substantial, if you really, are unfamiliar with tech, we're going to do like a half an hour, here's how to log in. So I'm imagining maybe different levels of sort of guiding people along.
Yeah, I can take that one. Thank you for that question. That's such an awesome question. We grapple with that too. Always trying different ways to see what works. And we do offer orientation. Our experience is that people don't come until the day. So there's this very big push for just-in-time learning. And so we've been exploring ways that we sort of split it up in different ways. Like we might give people a little taste of it so they can see in fact, we'll be doing that today with you all, give them a taste of it so that they can see what it looks like and set their expectation. And then as anytime we have an event that uses new software or new platform, we always take people through some sort of a simple training experience so that people can feel like I can at least basically navigate the system. So I think that's a really excellent point, to make time for that and not assume that people will come and be lost and disappear forever. Cynthia, you're muted.
Similar question. What about the level of tech you have? So, for example, I have an older iMac, and I'm running into the problem now that I'm invited to a meeting and I get there and I find out, oh, it's Microsoft and they want me to update right now. And my computer says, sorry, we're not supporting your program anymore. So, how much of that is going on and how much do you make it accessible for people?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's definitely software requirements for particular systems. Today we're going to be using spatial chat that it will run on different browsers, but it's best on the Chrome browser. So that's like an example of where you might run into some of those limitations. What we recommend is just a lot of communication before the event describing to people, here's what you're going to need in order to make it to this event or to come to this part of the event. Hopefully, in the communications we sent out, we intended anyway to inform people that they needed to use Google Chrome. Um, you're shaking your head. Part of the problem is, and this goes to Chanel's question too, of what about a video or something like that? We've tried things like that where we offer a video in advance, or we offer a session beforehand to learn how to use some of these things. And people very rarely come, and they also even rarely watch the videos. So we've learned to try to do it in the meeting itself, in the session itself. Okay, we're running short on time, so we're going to do Mike, and then we're going to move over to spatial chat. So Mike, go ahead.
Well, it's kind of related to what you were just describing. I'm thinking that, you really could have something leading up to the conference. The conference is a day or two, but you could have 3 or 4 or 5 days before where you connect people, where you find, people provide information on themselves. And, you can imagine the conference being much more than just the 2 days that it's, scheduled for. And wonder how much you've gotten into that.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And in fact, we have a conference that we're working with in a couple of weeks on July 15th, I think. And the week before, we're having a kickoff event where anyone who's registered can come. We're calling it a party, and you can meet some people before you go to the virtual conference in advance, and you can hear about what the conference is going to be. And it's a great opportunity for people to get all their software working properly and try things and all of that. So just the kind of thing you're talking about, Mike. Yeah.
It's interesting for an act. You mentioned every other year you have in person and virtual. For the in-person meeting, you can imagine that there'd be some value in having a virtual conference at night where people, can, in addition to being there physically, they can go at night and do some of the things that you're talking about here, because there are certain advantages, right, to being in person and kind of having a mix of those two. So very exciting, really.
That's cool. That's a really interesting idea. That's great. Okay, let's move on. Thank you all so much. We're going to transition over to spatial chat.